Greetings, Vast Ice Pops and YouTube gaming family. We're going to talk today about the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, I haven't played it yet, but I've been keeping up with the news around it while trying to diligently avoid spoilers, and I have some thoughts. Thoughts that came up around some of the discussion I was seeing about how important it is or required it is to play the original Final Fantasy VII for PlayStation or PC before playing the remake. So, people were coming at it from various ways. The term gatekeeper got thrown around a little bit. I'm going to address that with my own perspective. Final Fantasy VII is a game that means a lot to me. It was the first PlayStation game I ever owned. And I played it between Christmas vacation 97-98 during high school, and I thought it was a fantastic game, and I still do. It comes up in those discussions of greatest RPGs and best games and all that. There's diehards who think it's the best RPG ever made, and there's people on the opposite side who think, oh, how could you possibly think that? It has this, and this wrong with it. I'm not really here to discuss that. I'm here to talk about what I feel are reasons you should or should not play the original game. So, let's get right into it. If you're the type of player who wants to chase trophies and achievements, and if you're the type of player who wants to perform feats in the game, who likes to have bragging rights about, I did this and I did that. For example, beating Ruby Weapon and Emerald Weapon. Beating Emerald Weapon and Ruby Weapon was generally considered to be the pinnacle of Final Fantasy VII accomplishment. Now, I can only assume that they're going to include the weapons in the remake once they come out with future chapters. Obviously, it's not going to be in the first one. To that end, I hope they include the ability to fight Sapphire Weapon, because if they don't, I'm going to be disappointed. Now, here's my take on it, and I could be wrong about this. In general, I've noticed that when games get remade, they tend to be easier. And I'm not talking about games that just have graphical overhauls. I'm talking about games that are completely remade and then have updated features. Like you have the original Final Fantasy, then you had Final Fantasy Origins, which was largely unchanged from the original. They fixed a couple of bugs with spells, and they fixed the attack misdirection, where if two characters attacked the same enemy and the first character killed the enemy, the second character would just attack the empty space and get an automatic miss. They fixed it so where you would redirect your attack to another random target. But then they came out with Dawn of Souls for handheld, and then they added a whole bunch of extra weapons, extra dungeons, all these other extra bells and whistles that you could collect to basically overpower yourself. And that basically made the main game a whole lot easier. So I would be very leery of someone who said, yeah, I beat the original Final Fantasy, but they've only played the Dawn of Souls version. That to me, I don't know. You could call me a gatekeeper for that. That's fine. So getting back to Final Fantasy VII, I have a feeling, I could be wrong about this because of the action combat. We don't know yet. The weapons might end up being easier to fight in this game, because unlike in the original, the only way to avoid attacks was by luck. If your character's evasion was high enough, you have a random chance of avoiding attacks. Otherwise, you're taking damage no matter what. In an action combat system, attacks can be physically avoided through skill. So, I don't know how it's going to work out with the new combat system, comparatively speaking, but in a general sense, I would not brag about beating Emerald Weapon and Ruby Weapon or any of the other weapons if you have not beaten them in the original game. That to me is something I am rather gatekeeperish on, because anyone who played them in the original and fought the weapons know that they're no joke. It takes tremendous preparation and a whole lot of luck. And I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who have developed, like gimmick strategies to like take as little damage as possible and things like that. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about just going in with your own mind and your own skills and going at it, fresh. I was unique in that I beat Ruby Weapon on my first try. I still don't know how I did it, and Cloud was the only one alive at the end, but I did it. Anyway, we're not here to talk about my accomplishments. But if you're going to chase trophies and accomplishments, I would be hesitant to brag about it if you haven't beaten the original iteration of the game. Even just beating the game itself. It could bring up issues with people. You could say, I beat Final Fantasy VII. Or someone might ask you, have you beaten Final Fantasy VII? You say yes. Well, now you have to qualify which version of the game you've beaten. And you might say, oh yeah, the remake. Oh, but you never played the original? No, why? Well, if you've never beaten the original, then you're kind of... like, how do you brag about beating Final Fantasy VII if you've never beaten the original? Some people might look at that as gatekeeping. That's just how I feel about it. I mean, you can feel free to disagree. So, in essence, if you really want to go double platinum about your Final Fantasy VII accomplishments, then you should play the original game and beat the weapons and perform all of the other accomplishments that there are to accomplish in the original. Now, you don't have to necessarily play it before, but you should play it eventually. And that includes beating the weapons, beating Sephiroth, getting all the limit breaks, breeding a gold chocobo, finding all the unique materials, things like that. If you intend to engage in online discussions that compare both games, you should play the original if you haven't already. This should go without saying, but some people might feel like that they know enough about the original that they don't really have to play the original in order to talk about it, which I don't know why people would think that, but here we are. Well, I played the remake, so I know everything about the original plus more. Well, not really. There are going to be subtle things that only people who played the original game can reference. Only people who played the original game can talk about. Funny quirks, funny glitches, points of dialogue, things like that. You might quote something from the remake, and then someone will say, yeah, that's a quote from the original game that they took, but they phrased it this way. There's going to be little minute things that you're not going to be aware of if you don't play the original game and take all of that in. You should play the original game if you want to understand the cultural impact that Final Fantasy VII made and why it warrants a remake over all these other Final Fantasy games that I'm sure plenty of diehards in their communities think need a remake. Final Fantasy VII is known for bringing RPG games into the mainstream. And, before that, people who weren't RPG fans but identified as gamers generally played things like, Mario, Zelda, your Maddens, your racing games, your boxing games, your tournament fighters. Oh yeah, tournament fighters were huge in the 90s. Oh, but then we saw that first commercial with the cutscenes from Final Fantasy VII and Cloud Strife. And when people saw that sexy beast on the television, they were like, whoa, I gotta get this game. And the rest is history. So if you want to understand, if you weren't around at that time, especially, and you want to understand why people make such a big deal about this game, you need to go play it. So, if you've played other Final Fantasy games, but you haven't played 7, A, I find that very strange. And B, you should absolutely play the original before you play the remake. Now, let's move on to the people that can, in my opinion, safely skip the original. If you're only in it for the story, then skip the original. The remake, from what I've read, while trying to avoid spoilers, takes all the story elements from the original, which gave birth to dozens of fan theories about things, and is slowly plugging up those fan theories. A lot of what was used to be fan theory in the original is going to be addressed and will become part of the new canon as the remake further chapters come out. So if the story part is all you really care about, but you haven't played the original, you can skip it, because it's going to have all the story of the original plus more, a lot more. So you can safely skip the original if you are only in it for the story. On the flip side, you can also skip it if you don't care about the story. If you don't care about the story at all, if you're just the type of person who loves action RPGs and just wants to go at it from that aspect and just enjoying the fast-paced combat and enjoying the gameplay itself, but you don't really care that much about story, skip the original. If all you're in it for is the action, then the original has nothing for you. It's turn-based combat, and most people will probably find it boring. And some of the graphics don't age very well. It was from that polygonal age of video gaming. Now, the cutscenes of the game look good to me. But some of the other textures have not aged gracefully. So, if all you're in it for is, ooh, pretty new game on my 4K TV, fast action combat, adrenaline, feels good, skip the original. It has nothing for you. If you've never played a Final Fantasy game before, if you're looking at the remake thinking, well, now might be the time to jump on that Final Fantasy VII bandwagon. I don't know why you'd do that more than 15 games in. And when I say more than 15, we have 15 main titles, and then there are a slew of spin-off titles. So, I don't know why you'd wait that long, but who knows? Maybe you're a youngin' who grew up playing, their older brother's games or older sister's games, and, they played just mainly Mario or Madden or racing or something, but now you're growing up and coming into your own personality, and it doesn't quite match, and you're thinking, hey, look, I like RPGs. I think I might like to get into this. The Final Fantasy VII Remake will probably be a good place for you to jump on, because from what I've read, it's new player friendly, very accessible to new players of the series. And Final Fantasy 15 was also, if I recall correctly, advertised as a Final Fantasy game for new and old fans. So I see the Final Fantasy VII Remake being a continuation of a lot of that pacing and that design, where you can jump right into the action and just start playing the game and have it not feel overwhelming. If you've never played a Final Fantasy game and want to see what the fuss is about, this will probably be a good introduction to what modern Final Fantasy games are. Now, if you really want a more classic experience in terms of classic Final Fantasy games, play anything from 1 to 6. That's my recommendation. 1 through 6 had the more classic style. It was like top-down, and you had turn-based combat and those kinds of things. So it depends on what you're looking for. So you can just skip the original if you just want to jump onto the train with this one and take it off from there. My recommendation would definitely be to play the original at some point, but I do not feel it's necessary to play it before playing the remake if you've never played a Final Fantasy game. Finally, people who have played the prequel games for handheld. I never have, because I wasn't interested, and I never owned a PSP anyway. If you've played those, but for some reason or another haven't played Final Fantasy VII, well, at this juncture, there's really no point. It is very likely, I have not read a lot on this, but if you've had the prequels already, they came out after the original, obviously. So, they have elements in them that lead up to the original game, but since they came after, and this Final Fantasy VII Remake is coming after that, there's going to be a lot of that stuff from the prequels that's intermingled into the story in the remake. So if you have everything from the prequels, you're going to get everything that Final Fantasy VII has, plus a lot more. So some people might recommend that you play the prequels before you play Final Fantasy VII. I don't have an opinion on that because I haven't played them. Personally, I don't think it's necessary. Feel free to disagree. So that's the video. I hope no one wants to brand me as a gatekeeper. It's not my intention. I think everybody should play the original, and I think everybody should play the remake. That's just how I feel about it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell, and share, and I will see you guys in the next video. That will do it for this chapter. Thank you for checking out my channel. If you like my content, please tell me in the comments below, or if you have any general feedback, I'd welcome that as well. Make sure you subscribe so that you're always up to date with all of my latest gaming adventures.